YouTube, how the duck you doing? Duck Films here, and today I'm teaching you everything you need to know about the new Vanguard Devil Dinosaur and Marvel Rivals, so that when you're picking this character on release day, you have the slight edge that your opponents may not know. Whether it's abilities, combos, thoughts, and just or ideas, make sure to check out this video, or if you want to see any of my other content, definitely check it out as well. But without further ado, I hope you sit back, relax, and let's dive straight in. Now, if you want to play the dinosaur from Meet the Robinsons, if you know you know, then this is where you get started. Now, I do want to quickly talk about some of his passives because I think it's pretty important to get an idea of this character. The first things first, he has a ridiculously big head, just like Jeff the Landshark. With that, he takes reduced headshot damage or critical hits, and he's immune to launch-ups, knockbacks, and other displacement effects, while as enemies and allies generate less ultimate ability energy when damaging or healing him, which is pretty crazy. So because he's such a large hitbox, he's going to be generating less ultimate charge for your own team's healers, which can be good, but it is also pretty bad if you think about it in that aspect. And for the headshot damage, you can see he does take significantly less in versus of other Vanguards, but he is still decently easy to kill, so about 5-ish shots or so. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, the other passive ability he has is called Apex Advantage, where you gain bonus health when you inflict bleeding and deal damage. To inflict the bleeding, you need to use your Primal Bite, which is your mouse 1. You bite forward, apply a bleed that deals continuous percent damage, which is pretty crazy. As you can see, you do the bleeding, you gain HP, and it stacks all the way up to about 1050 HP, which is quite a lot for a tank, but you do have to keep in mind he has an insanely large hitbox, so that HP will get whittled down pretty quickly. Now let's just go ahead and talk about its abilities just to stay on the topic and stay in the same exact category. Like I said, you have Primal Bite, which is his primary attack, his left mouse button or probably right trigger on the controller, where you bite forward, apply bleed that deals continuous percent damage. And as you know, percent damage can chunk enemies pretty well, especially other Vanguards. I see this character being really good in like a spawn hold idea, and that's really about it. He has a rather large hitbox, so he's going to be pretty easy to take care of. Following that, you have your alternative attack, or your secondary attack, whatever you want to describe it as, which is your impact beam, where you unleash a devastating beam of energy that inflicts a bleed, slow, and knock down airborne targets. This is the beam. It's 15 meters. It applies the bleed just like your primary attack. So both your primary attack and secondary attack apply bleed. Now this bleed is useful in the case of using your other abilities, which we'll get right into. Now let's go ahead and talk about his shift ability or movement ability, which is Savage Predation. You dash and pounce on your prey with a vicious bite, applying a bleed. If the target is already bleeding, you want to clamp down before hurling them away, which is a sort of control effect. So this means that if you just shift, you see you do the launch, you bite them, it applies the bleeding. But what you want to do instead is actually apply a bleed, like so, then press shift onto them, because when you do, you actually will grab them, if I can actually show this properly. So I apply a bleed, I press shift, and you can see I grab them like so. You fling them away and launch them away. So again, it's probably in some of your best interests to go ahead and apply the bleed and do the shift. While using this shift as an escape tool is a great idea, having it as an option to try to throw off enemies or try to dismantle the enemy's frontline by doing this ability is probably one of the better ideas, just to cause a little bit more chaos, because chaos in this game is usually your best friend. Moving on, just like most of the other Vanguards in this game, he has some sort of shield, whether it's a self shield, an AoE shield, or a shield like Doctor Strange or Magneto. We have the Buddy Barrier, where you activate the heart-shaped generator to expand a spherical shield that blocks incoming damage, and enemies caught within it are slowed. So you press E, you can see a 450 shield that's 360 degrees with some room enough to have some teammates in it. Say, for example, a teammate's getting dived, you could probably shift to them and then press E to try to help them out, which can be used in a lot of different applications, what I think is pretty cool because it offers some versatility. I consider Devil Dinosaur as the Jeff of the Vanguard world, essentially. And I do quickly want to say, if you made it this far into the video so far, do me a favor, hit that like button. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you're coming back on the regular. I have a ton of Marvel Rivals content, Deadlock content, and future content in the works, so definitely consider subscribing, and well, let's get right back into it. Now let's go ahead and talk about the other ability, which is Frenzied Feast. You unleash a flurry of continuous bites, converting the damage dealt into bonus health. It deals extra damage against bleeding targets, so just as the F ability without, bleeding. You can see the damage and the lunge at the end. But when you add the bleeding effect, refresh this. When you add the bleeding effect like so, you can see it's a lot more damage because you have that continuous damage over time. So the idea with this character is pretty much before you do any of the abilities or you try to do any combos or anything of the sort, you always want to begin with having or applying the bleeding effect, whether it's done from a primary attack, your right click, which is your secondary attack to beam, whatever the case may be, you always want to have this bleeding passive going so that you can use the full extent of the character. Because without the bleeding, you're missing a lot of the extra damage. Sometimes you might have to be putting out abilities without the bleeding effect, but I would always recommend try to get some bleeding in before you use any of your abilities, so that you can actually perform a chop and a throw into a beam or whatever the case may be in certain scenarios. So his ultimate is a double beast Rampage where you erupt in Primal Fury, you gain a massive movement speed boost while unleashing earth-shattering stomps that launch enemies and apply a bleed. Thunderous Roars also emit sonic waves that slow enemies in the control effect. So when you activate your ultimate, you gain an insane amount of movement speed, enemies within the AoE get the bleeding effect. That means you can use your other abilities like so. You gain a huge amount of overshield and you basically become a giant-sized punchy bag essentially. And I say that in a nice way, mainly because yes, you do gain a lot of HP, but you also have a tremendously large and obscure hitbox, so you're relatively easy to shoot. So, I mean, if you're playing a character like Punisher, Hawkeye, any characters that benefit from getting headshots or doing continuous damage to characters, will probably have a field day on a character like this. So that is something to keep in mind when you're playing this character. So is this character a main tank? No, it's an off tank and probably on the same realm of a Hulk, a Captain America, or, an Emma Frost, maybe a rogue that's trying to go in, distort the enemies, be annoying as possible. Maybe not necessarily the same as Emma Frost, but certainly a rogue, Hulk, and so on. Because this character receives so much damage, you probably have to pair it up with a Magneto or a different main shield tank to get the character to have some value. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the team up because I think it's hilarious. And that is, when you're playing as Punisher, you literally just ride the dinosaur. If it'll let me on. But, okay. Basically, you see the 850 HP of the shield. But the thing is, like, when the Punisher rides atop the Devil Dinosaur, the Punisher gains damage reduction. The Devil Dinosaur absorbs a portion of all damage inflicted on the Punisher and shares some of his healing received. So if you're fighting, the healing that you're getting is going to be split probably 50-50 between the Devil Dinosaur and Punisher, as well as the damage reduction. The damage is probably split 50-50, I would assume. There isn't actual numbers specified of what I know, but I can only infer and assume that it's probably split 50-50, or it might be less because it's a Vanguard with a duelist, so maybe 75 to, the Devil Dinosaur and so on, but who really knows? It's a cool little gimmick, and I think some people might like it. Do I think it's super practical? Probably not really, but I think it's pretty funny at all the least. It kind of reminds me of Rocket on top of Groot or Jeff on Groot, so definitely a cool little idea that they came up with. But yeah. Now we made it to the combo and more section. So with the combos, there's some things to keep in mind. Again, just like I stated earlier in the video, all of your combos come from dealing bleeding first, whether it's from your left click or your right click, right trigger, left trigger, wherever the case may be. It's always that case. My ideas for combos is applying a bleed, going for your shift, throwing them into your enemy or into your own team. So applying a bleed, shifting if I don't kill the enemy. I'll just go over here, I guess. But it's just essentially, if I put, let's say, Brutes, for example, you want to apply the bleed, shift, and then throw them into your enemy team, kind of acting like a Wolverine or Angela in a sorts of going for some sort of kidnap to try to disorient the enemy. So you apply a bleed, you go for the shift, throw them into your team. From there, you can use your right click or your F, or you can just be a frontline and kind of body block the enemies from trying to heal the person you're intercepting or trying to grab, which is definitely like a little bit better than I would say that of, I guess, Wolverine and Angela, because you can actually block healing yourself instead of having your shield tank do it. You can just do it yourself. So you go for a grab, do that, throw him into your team, and then you just shield block the healing coming towards him is one idea you can do. Or it's literally just spamming all of your buttons. So essentially, you're applying a bleed, you're going for a shift into him, just eating, and then you're pressing 4. I think it's a good idea to, when you're going for, tanks or when you're going for characters, to actually do the bubble shield, so that if you're trying to pull them away, you can actually just, block the shielding or block the healing they're receiving, which I think is a pretty cool idea. Because, like I said, usually you would have a Magneto or a Doctor Strange blocking the healing, but you kind of, with this character, take it into your own accord. You do it yourself, so you don't have to worry about your other tank. The other tank can actually think about shielding for his team and doing whatnot. You can kind of be an isolated hero, just managing on your own, which can be useful in certain scenarios, but also bad in others. So that is something to keep in mind. Another fun fact, when you actually try to do a light melee, it's with the tail. So you can only hit people behind you, which I guess is a cool, funny gimmick, and it makes sense because your hands are a little too small, so you can't really reach the enemy. Like, it makes sense, but hindsight, it just means like you'll never use a light melee, so there isn't like any melee tech to weave in because you can't add it. But I guess it's kind of helpful if you're like retreating and there's people behind you, but you probably should never really turn around in this sense. But maybe you could do a little like wacha, like a little left click spin around slap, you know what I'm saying? But like, out of real practicality, I don't think you will actually do that. But I think it's a funny gimmick that they've added. In terms of actual team compositions with this character, in my eyes, I think this character is going to be very difficult to play, just because the sheer amount of characters that they have in this game that just absolutely dump damage into Vanguards that have like a big hitbox, like Elsa, Phoenix, Winter Soldier, Punisher, Hawkeye, Hela. Basically all the meta heroes or the meta duelists will just pump damage into this character because, yes, he takes less damage to the head, but even though he takes reduced damage, he still has a really large head hitbox. So that means that you can just pump damage into him and build your ultimate, I would say, relatively fast. Yes, he does take, or less he does make it to where you build less ultimate charge because of his large head. That doesn't mean that he can't be killed super fast. So like you can see, that when I'm doing damage, I'm gaining ult charge very slowly. But when I jumped a full mag of Star-Lord into him, it basically did off his HP. In practicality, you probably would never be this close, but for reference, it's 100 headshots with Star-Lord to dump him. And Star-Lord now has 50 bullets in his magazine. So it's going to be hard, I feel, for this character to get a lot of impact. Just because, like, yes, he takes less headshot damage, but, like, the headshot is so big that I don't think it really matters. Like, it's less than a mag to kill him on Punisher with all headshots. But yeah, I mean, I guess you are building less headshot, or you're building less ult charge, but, like, he still dies really fast. yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you like this character? Do you not? That's a little bit of a masterclass or some food for thought or ideas with this character. Pretty much all the combos start with having the bleeding effect, and the rest is pretty much up to you. But yeah, hope you guys have a great and safe day, and I'll catch you in the next one.